Righto, let's get into the best cricketing nation in the world playing a test of cricket in Christchurch. That is the best cricketing nation in the world who have gone 1-4 in their last 5 tests against England, and it's the best cricketing nation in the world that has gone 1-2 in the last 3 tests at Hagley Oval. So shout out to the Black Caps Test cricket team. Also shout out to Snehith Reddy. Let me get his full name because it's a banger of a full name. Snehith Reddy Devareddy. I did see he's otherwise known as Lucky Reddy, because he's also a 17-year-old and he scored a lot of runs in the warm-up game for the New Zealand. Let's go with New Zealand 11. Like, we don't tend to get political here at the Niche Cage, so I'm just gonna leave it at that. The New Zealand 11 that played a warm-up game against England, and Snehith Reddy scored 60 runs in the first innings when no other New Zealand batter. And this team, this New Zealand 11, obviously not selected by a bald, middle-aged, half Pākehā, half Palangi man of the New Zealand Elderly Crip Party. Let's go with that one. This team, obviously not selected by that man, is made up of players who aren't playing domestic cricket. So it's like all the guys deep in the depth chart of the respective Plunket Shield teams. Snehith Reddy's from Hamilton. He plays for Northern Districts. He scored 60 runs in the first innings when no other Kiwi batter scored over 20 runs. Second innings was a bit better for the Kiwi batters, and Reddy finished 33 not out. This is interesting, I reckon, because Reddy earned a Northern Districts contract as a 17-year-old, and he was also the only Kiwi batter to score a century at the Under-19 World Cup earlier this year, I believe. Only 2 Kiwi batters scored a 50, and they both came against Nepal. Oscar Jackson from Wellington was the other, scored a 50 in that game. Reddy scored a century. So, like, yeah, Nepal's pretty good at cricket, actually, so it's not like to diminish the achievement of scoring a big old century at an Under-19 World Cup. But after that, he earned a contract for Northern Districts. After that, he, in my opinion, was the best batter for the New Zealand 11 against the touring England team. So stash that away, because he seems like a good young cricketer. In this warm-up game, England scored at 5.5 RPO in the first innings and then 8.9 RPO in the second innings. So they were doing what England does. But in both innings, first innings they were all out, and second innings they lost 9 wickets in a run chase that I don't think was an actual run chase, because they fell a few runs short, but they still had a wicket in hand. So obviously it was just typical warm-up cricket things. So aside from learning a little bit about some Kiwi cricketers in this game, learned a bit more about England, just having a whack, that's what they do. But also not necessarily a dominant performance from England, considering they lost 19 wickets while also scoring quickly. And yes, Reddy was the only Kiwi batter to put up a score in the first innings, but you had Jamal Todd from Otago scoring 49, Hunter Kinley from Otago scoring 56, Troy Johnson from Wellington, he scored 80, Jesse Tashkoff from Wellington scored 56 in the second innings. So far from a dominant performance from England, but as I'm learning, like, I don't really want to come to any grand conclusions about a warm-up game, nor do I want to forecast how a game of Test cricket is going to play out, because recent Test results have just baffled my mind. Obviously, I'm talking about New Zealand. That's all. The only cricket team I talk about is New Zealand, and them going to India and beating India 3-0 in India just blew my mind. So I can't really figure out Test cricket right now. But but I can predict that England are going to come out and have a whack because, let's be honest, it's blatantly obvious that that's what they're going to do. And also with England, you've got a situation where Jordan Cox, apparently the only specialist wicketkeeper in their squad, he got injured, so he's not going to be playing. I think Jeetan Patel, sorry, must still have a bit of COVID because my words are all over the show. Got that long vid. But maybe Jeetan Patel just injured Jordan Cox with the throwdowns or something like that. So good stuff there. All the Kiwis involved in England cricket. So they lost their starting wicketkeeper in England. Also have Rian Ahmed leggy, Shoaib Bashir offie, and Jack Leach left arm offie for a test series in New Zealand. So England are coming to Aotearoa and they're playing... Did all three spinners bowl in this warm-up game? We had Leach, Bashir, and yeah, it was just a bit of Leach, a bit of Bashir. They didn't bowl a whole lot, to be honest. But if you're selecting three spinners in your squad, seems like England are going to select a specialist spinner in their first 11 for the test at Hagley Oval, and that is Hagley Oval, where it's going to seam, it's going to swing, and runs are going to be scored, although I have seen a lot of English people talking about flat pitches in New Zealand.
So have I. I saw that as well. And I didn't believe it. Like, I get that they play flat a little bit. Like, I think the standard New Zealand pitch will swing around a bit on day one and then flatten out as it goes along. But like, that's how all cricket pitches react. Unless they either flatten out or they break up, you know? I wouldn't have thought that to be the defining aspect of Kiwi cricket conditions, though. I would have thought surely it's the seam movement that's going to catch you out rather than the flatness and the good batting conditions kind of thing. I think that might be wishful thinking from England because a flat wicket is kind of their perfect conditions because they can just go after it with the bat, right? Which we saw when they were in Pakistan, right? Like they had that game where they conceded 500 in the first innings and then got a 200+ run lead and went on and won that test match. And then afterwards, Pakistan made sure that there was nothing nearly that flat again for the rest of the series. And did Pakistan end up winning that series? I can't remember.
Maybe. I only watched the best cricket team in the world.
Yeah, same. So we don't have time for these the pretenders out there.
Yeah, it's like best cricket team in the world and Plunket Shield.
And then other test cricket nations if there's time, which there isn't because there's so much good Plunket Shield.
No, it's best cricket team in the world, Plunket Shield, HBJ Shield.
True. And then chuck in a little bit of Ford Trophy and Super Smash and then at some point
So yeah, I don't... Like, yes, runs are scored at Hagley. Like, we had Chad Bowes scored a double century at Hagley this summer. I think that was in the Ford Trophy. Canterbury played a Plunket Shield game there as well. Jeet Raval scored a lot of runs. So, and batters do score a lot of runs in Christchurch. Like, it does get better for batting. But I would, like, maybe Napier's a bit flat. Hamilton can get a bit flat, but those are like the flattest pitches and conditions you'll find in New Zealand. Yeah, and this is my idea about the test. I think New Zealand need it to be as nibbly as possible, especially if, as it looks like, they are going to select Nathan Smith as part of a four-pronged, shout out to the prongs, a four-headed seam bowling beast, Tim Southee. Now, let me get this clear. Tim Southee's out of form, but Tim Southee also averages 22.6 at Hagley Oval. So I think he's going to be there. You know, like I think he's in the team, even though everyone wants him out of the team. So you're going to have Tim Southee, you're going to have Matt Henry, you're going to have Will O'Rourke, and I think you're going to have Nathan Smith. You kind of got to select Nathan Smith because he's a good batter. And he's also a dominant seam swing bowler in New Zealand. Jacob Duffy was second to Nathan Smith for Plunket Shield wickets last summer. So he deserves to be there. But if we're selecting Glenn Phillips as the all-rounder, the main all-rounder, and we want to have as nibbly conditions as possible, those nibbly conditions are going to benefit Nathan Smith, but Nathan Smith also adds some pretty decent batting alongside Matt Henry. Like, I'm really looking forward to you're not going to have it in order, but because it goes Glenn Phillips, Tom Blundell, Nathan Smith, Matt Henry, but Phillips, Smith, Henry is going to be a very fun batting trio. How are you feeling about the team selection, possible debut for Nathan Smith?
Well, oops, forgot to press the button. Well, I was thinking about the last time England came here when I think they were playing, those were late summer test matches as well, eh? So, which I think was, Neil Wagner had that one where he got the last wicket and we won by a couple of runs or something. It was a split series, but there was a very, famous test match in the second one. Pretty sure those were late summer test matches. So, first of all, I think that might play into why England are thinking the decks are flatter here than they actually are, because here they're playing 3 or 4 months earlier than what those ones would have been, when there will still be a bit of the old winter juice in the wickets. But because of that, I mean, I know we just had a great series of spin in India, but I think this is definitely the time to go back to the old four-pronged, what did we call it? The four-prong with the seam attack. Like that just stacks up. Nathan Smith coming in, trying to be the new Colin de Grandhomme, sweet as. We can now do this with Glenn Phillips and Rachin Ravindra still giving spin options within the within the 11, without having to sacrifice a bowler or anything like that. That's I think it's sort of one of those ones where it picks itself with one exception. The one exception is, what do you do with Will Young? And I kind of think maybe the thing you do with Will Young is you don't play him, which I know sounds pretty rough because he's just got player of the series in India and he's been scoring runs in all formats for the last couple of months and looking fantastic. But you're not picking him ahead of Kane Williamson. If you're asking him to open instead of someone like Devon Conway, then you're asking him to bat in a different role to what he's been successful at recently, which maybe you want to do, but that's also that's not a straight swap. You're moving Will Young around to do that, which would also be the same if you picked him instead of like I don't know, Daryl Mitchell maybe at 5 or something. There's not really anyone else who's droppable except maybe Tom Blundell, in which case you'd have to get the gloves to Conway, which I guess you could do if you wanted to go down that path. The thing is, Tom Blundell and especially Daryl Mitchell have fantastic records batting against England. When we went to England and got thrashed there not that long ago, those two were holding the whole batting lineup together with the runs they were scoring. So I think the simplest solution is the one that people aren't necessarily considering. The question is, how do you get Will Young into the team? And I think the answer might just be, you don't. Like, unless someone gets injured, I'm not sure that you do.
And that's all right. You've only
Yeah,
got
it's
11
fine.
players, and New Zealand is pretty good at cricket. So you're going to have players that are good enough to be in the team, but won't be in the team. And it's Kane Williamson at the end of the day. So you got to give some, like, if anyone deserves to come straight back into the team, it is Kane Williamson. But also now there is pressure on other batters to perform. So yes, Will Young might miss out the first test. Whoa, crikey Jack, yeah, Daryl Mitchell's pretty good against England. But you better score some runs. Because if you don't score runs, Will Young's right there. And that's to the benefit of Kiwi cricket. I will push back again. I've said it before. I'm surprised that you referenced Nathan Smith as Colin de Grandhomme, because Glenn Phillips is Colin de
I saw the
Grandhomme.
look on your face when I said that. I was like, I only meant that as a fourth seam bowling option, but he is more he's certainly not the same type of batter, and I think he's probably the more skilled seam bowler as well. He's someone who's pushing to be selected in the actual front line, sort of same things. But I
And
meant that very loosely, but yes, I see. I see what you're saying.
like, it's not like Glenn Phillips is just a first 11 cricketer right now. That's what it is. Forget about what he does. Although what he does is very important when we're considering he's the best fielder in the team. He whacks the ball and he bowls pretty good off spin. Regardless of his skill set, he's a first 11 cricketer. So whatever conditions you're showing up to play in, he's there. And then you build around that. And the fact that New Zealand can have 2 spinners and 4 frontline seamers, that's pretty cool. And all are right arm seamers, right? You got Tim Southee, classical right arm swing. Matt Henry, seam. Will O'Rourke, freak. But he also moves the ball in the opposite direction of Southee with his swing and the swing that Nathan Smith has. So he's got his bounce, he smashes hands, he bowls massive hoop and in-swingers, and he nibbles the ball all over the show. Nathan Smith, as we saw in Sri Lanka, he bowls 137 to 139. He might hit 140, I reckon, in Christchurch, because he was given it a nudge in Sri Lanka, and he bowls like he is a faster Tim Southee. He's got the sharp swing, but I think he's also got the ability to nibble the ball back into the right-handers as well. So they're all right-arm seam. But we've got O'Rourke, who, if I think Nathan Smith can hit 140 Ks, I reckon Will O'Rourke can hit 145. So we've got Southee nudging 130. We got Matt Henry in the mid 130s. We got Nathan Smith nudging 140. We got Will O'Rourke nudging 145. They're all different heights. They all move the ball. Like, this isn't a plain Jane group of right arm seamers for New Zealand. And it's also important to note, like, Nathan Smith is here because Kyle Jamison's injured. Ben Sears is injured. So we're like, yes, Nathan Smith did seem destined to play Test cricket this summer, but last summer it was Ben Sears getting a debut. And we've still got Kyle Jamieson averaging 17.5 at Hagley Oval, the very flat Christchurch pitch where Kyle Jamieson is an absolute nightmare. Who is the best New Zealand spinner to bowl at Hagley Oval?
Who have we played there recently? You said we've lost a couple of our recent test matches. One of those would have been against Australia, I would imagine.
Well, I mean, there's been Australia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, England, Sri Lanka, India, South Africa, Australia. We've played a lot of teams. Who's the best spinner?
So this is all time. This isn't from the current squad, you mean? In which case,
Forever.
The obvious answer is probably just Daniel Vittori then?
I don't think he bowled at Hagley because Hagley's a new...
Oh, he would, yeah, he wouldn't have necessarily got to play there very much. In which case, it's not Ajaz Patel. 0 wickets in New Zealand conditions. I know that's true. Maybe it's just... I'll be saying over time. So maybe it's something freaky, like it'll be Mark Craig or something. If it's not him, I was going to guess Mitchell Santner, but...
Mark Craig's actually... He might be the worst.
Okay. I mean, yeah, okay, sure, but...
Technically, 3 deliveries from Luturu Taylor for 1 wicket is top of the pops.
Of course, legendary. How could I forget? The last 3 deliveries of his career, too.
For bowlers who have bowled more than half and over, it is Kane Williamson. He's got 2 wickets and an average of 17, 3 RPO. And then you've got Michael Bracewell's got 1 wicket, 44. Craig has 1 wicket at 88. Glenn Phillips has 1 wicket at 41. And then you've got Taylor's got 1 wicket. Todd Astle, 4 overs, no wickets. Ajaz Patel, 12 overs, no wickets. So no frontline spinner for New Zealand has more than one wicket at Hagley Oval.
Kind of a spinner's graveyard. Although, what I have you got like non-New Zealand numbers there? I might look that up because I imagine a lot of traveling teams are more likely to pick at least like the just the standard. We have a spinner in our 11 kind of lineups where at least then if you're bowling in bad spinning conditions, you still get to bowl to New Zealand batters who aren't that good at playing spins. So there's at least a balancing act there. Because there is that trend about how New Zealand spinners don't tend to take very many wickets here, which is why we don't often pick frontline spinners in home tests anymore. But the very best in the world traveling spinners have still been able to take wickets in these conditions. Not so much the All-Star Rans, but the best of the best definitely have been able to when they've turned up here. So I might look that up and just check.
Well, we've got Nathan Lyon. He's averaging 26 with the ball, 6 wickets at 26. Maharaj for South Africa's got 4 wickets at 30. Shakib Al Hassan's got 4 wickets at 19. So there are a few decent spinners there. But another point is that Canterbury usually have 2 spinners in their team when they're playing in Christchurch. Because they got Ripon and Cole McConchie. And if Ish Sodhi's available, sometimes he replaces Ripon. Sometimes they might go Ripon and Sodhi, but usually they will go with Sodhi ahead of Ripon. So you're always guaranteed 2 spinners in the Canterbury team across the formats. Obviously, when it goes white ball, they might go Ripon, Sodhi, and McConchie. But it is an interesting point. And the reason Glenn Phillips is so useful is now New Zealand just has a spinner all the time. They don't have to select a spinner or not select a spinner. You just always have a spinner because he's a first 11 cricketer. And I think that changes the selection dynamic where it's like, okay, do we need a spinner? How do we get a spinner in? Who are we taking out? Now it's just like, well, Glenn Phillips is just there. And if he's not going to bowl any overs, you know that Glenn Phillips is going to help the team as a fielder. You know that he is capable of scoring tough runs as well as giving it a CDG whack, because Glenn Phillips does have a first-class batting average of 40.5 with a strike rate of 67. So but what you're saying about the foreign spinners, that does kind of align with what England have done. So if England have read the situation correctly, they've seen Nathan Lyon was successful at Hagley Oval, so obviously Shoaib Bashir is going to be successful. But it is also interesting that depending on what they do and how many spinners they actually select, whether it's one specialist spinner, that will be a specialist spinner more than New Zealand. So I think either way, it's going to be a very interesting dynamic of how these 2 teams build out their respective first 11s.
Yeah, kind of crazy to look at those stats though and see that the top wickets are visiting players. So you get down to, as you said, Kane Williamson with his 2 wickets at 17s, 11 overs bowled across 10 test matches at the venue. So that's doesn't tell anything because we already know that Kane Williamson just doesn't bowl anymore. He hasn't bowled for a long time. That's fair enough. The variety is helpful, and it's probably one of those things where it's not like the Black Caps never wanted to have a spin bowler. It's just that they more wanted to have a 4th seamer who's more likely to take wickets. It's a luxury that they can now afford because of Glenn Phillips, because of how good Glenn Phillips is. He's in there as a top 7 batter, and he can bowl, and he can bowl. He can bowl quite. He's really developed quite a few different angles to his bowling now. It's not necessarily like he's got the change ups or anything like that, the variations, but he can bowl to contain runs. He can bowl to attack. He can bowl to give it a bit of a rip with his off spinner, or he can bowl to just kind of put it in a spot. Like he's been through enough different situations in Test cricket, enough different conditions that he's got the versatility, at least in that manner, through the experience that he's gained. Glenn Phillips does have a Test match fifer. He got one against. Well, he's got a couple, doesn't he? But he got one in particular at home against Australia last summer. Like you probably got to go back to Daniel Vittori to find a Black Caps spinner who's taken a fifer in home conditions. That's very rare. Like the versatility that offers the Black Caps when it comes to their selection is massive. Let alone the fact that Rachin Ravindra can roll the arm over as well. So you could have spin from both ends. Like if you needed it, if something crazy happened and the wicket just dried out or actually got that flat somehow, as flat as imagined, then you've got that option too. Like they tried for a very long time, I think, to try and manufacture an all-rounder, like someone to play in that 7 spot. For a while it was Colin de Gronholm. He was great, but he performed the role of a spinner, but he's not a spinner, so you still just had the seam bowling lineup. But like Ravindra himself spent some time there, Michael Bracewell and Mitchell Santner, and these guys where it's like they're not necessarily picking the best spinner, they're picking the best batter who can spin. But because Glenn Phillips is actually a good enough batter to be in the team on virtue of his batting and can spin, like it's problem solved. And they're just, I don't, otherwise I don't know that we would still be seeing Nathan Smith playing at a Hagley Oval type thing, but it gives a lot more freedom to how they want to construct an 11, which wasn't necessarily there in the past. So this is, I don't know, it's almost like cheating to have a genuine all-rounder. And I'd say he is nudging towards genuine all-rounder status at this point. He's batting all-rounder, but still, like to have someone who can do that in your team is almost like being able to pick 12 players in a lineup. It's like a cheat code, and the best teams have often in Test cricket had someone like that. We haven't for quite a long time, but at the moment they kind of do, and it's a I don't know, it's a blessing. It's a very helpful thing to be able to put together a Test squad with an all-rounder in place. It just makes all these other questions a lot easier to answer.
Again, I've got to stand up for G Philly, because you said he's nudging genuine all-rounder status. They don't get any more genuine all-roundery than the one and only Glenn Phillips. Like,
what's his bowling average at?
He is an all-rounder in the truest sense of the word. In a word, term, phrase. Like, he is the best fielder in the team. He's one of the best bowlers in the team. He's one of the best batters in the team. Like, it doesn't get any more all-rounder, first 11 certified, kind of Chris Cairns, who are some other legendary Kiwi all-rounders, Daniel Vittori.
Vittori's second half of his career, I think some people would say Hadley. I think Hadley wasn't necessary. I don't think his batting average was up in the thing, but he did have his Test century. I don't know, did Jacob Oram count? Maybe he wasn't as successful of a Test bowler as he was a Test batsman or as a one-day bowler. But Ross Taylor, yeah.
So Glenn Phillips bowling in Test, he averages 27.3, which is kind of better than any other spinner for New Zealand aside from Ajaz Patel. And he's got a very respectable first-class bowling average of 35.3. Very respectable considering most of your favourite spinners in New Zealand first-class cricket average around 40. Now, here's a bit of trivia for you, because we're going to get it again. You listen to anyone, and to be honest, I imagine some Kiwis are going to say it. Glenn Phillips, former wicketkeeper, he's so amazing because he only started bowling spin after he was a wicketkeeper When did Glenn Phillips start bowling in first-class cricket?
I would imagine that Glenn Phillips started bowling spin pretty much as soon as he started playing first-class cricket. I don't remember him like I know he was a wicketkeeper then by reputation, but he was not. It's not like he was ever the frontline wicketkeeper at any point. So I imagine he had plenty of opportunities to bowl, even if it was just a cheeky little over here or there before he really, harnessed the muscles there. But I didn't think he was bowling spin fairly quickly into his first-class career.
Glenn Phillips made his first-class debut March 2017, and he bowled his first overs of first-class cricket in the 2016-2017 season.
So basically straight away.
In his first-class season, let me rectify this. In his first-class debut, Glenn Phillips bowled 2 overs for 1 run. Let's see what he did in the second innings. He only bowled once. So his teammates in the bowling lineup, Lockie Ferguson, Donovan Grobler, Colin Munro, Mitchell McClenaghan, Taran Nathula, Glenn Phillips, Sean Solier. So if you're hearing Glenn Phillips, the wicketkeeper who only started bowling spin in recent years, Glenn Phillips literally bowled in his first-class debut in 2017. That's crazy. So shout out Glenn Phillips. He's been doing it. He's been building towards this moment where he is the best New Zealand spinner ever. Shout out to Daniel Vittori and shout out to anyone else in the history books that I have forgotten there.
Shout out to the ghost of Clary Grimmett,
Yep, shout out to that guy. This is something that I'll say with my chest. I think Glenn Phillips is underrated. The way he's talked about, what he does, he is my favourite test cricketer for New Zealand right now. I think he is... Yeah, sure, Kane Williamson's the best. Yeah, sure, Matt Henry's taken lots of wickets. But to me, Glenn Phillips is the best player in the test team. And I'm saying that half jokingly, but also I need to go above and beyond with my hot take to put Glenn Phillips on that pedestal because I think it's pretty legit. And I don't think he is talked about in that way. So shout out to Glenn Phillips. And shout out to anyone riding with Glenn Phillips. Obviously, look a wee bit silly if he doesn't make the first 11 for this first test. But
I find it hard to imagine he wouldn't. But as you said, he just feels like a locked on first 11 player now. And because he's got the different angles to his game, like there's no reason not to pick him, especially because of how his spin bowling all-rounder aspect does free you up to pick that extra seamer. So the idea of like the reason you might not pick him is to be able to pick another bowler, but then his presence allows you to pick another bowler anyway without having to drop him, if that makes sense. So, I think there's underratedness is just because he hasn't had a big score to bat yet. When he gets that first test 100, which hopefully will come this series, I think that nails it in because his batting average is almost like less impressive than his bowling average. 27.36 with the ball, with a 4 for and a 5 for 30 wickets at this point, bowled in 16 different innings. So this is it's still a small sample size, but it's getting towards a medium sample size. It's getting up there versus, 33.94 batting average, which is like, I think the bowling average might be a little bit inflated because of the more favorable conditions he's bowled in, but also I think the batting average is deflated because he's been playing in a lot of, that not a lot of runs were scored in that test series in India, for example. So I think the bowling average will boost up, which is fine because Daniel Vittori had a career average of like 35, 36 and probably our best black cap spinner. Well, if that's the benchmark, then Glenn Phillips can easily settle in as someone averaging 32, 33, and that is really, really good for a Kiwi spinner. But if that batting average is also above 40, then we're looking at something pretty fantastic. Right now, the batting average isn't, but he, like even last summer when, home conditions, that's normally when you'd expect the Black Caps batters to maybe cash in a bit more. Well, Australia came here. It's not easy to score runs against those guys at the best of times, and that probably wasn't the best of times given how the Black Caps performed through that series. So
I think we're going to be waiting for that big score a while more because he bats 7, right? Like he's not going to just score a century batting 7. But the thing about Glenn Phillips is he is a genuine batter who can bat with the guys ahead of him, but then he can transition into batting with the tail. And this is what makes him so useful batting in the role he is. Like there's like this, there's a bit of a rush to get him up the order maybe. But the thing about Glenn Phillips is he is a genuine batter who can craft out a long innings, and say he's batting with Tom Latham, Kane Williamson, Devon Conway. Yes, he can score a century, but it's going to be very difficult for that to happen. It's a situation that is going to set that up. But if Glenn Phillips is coming to the crease later on in the innings, he will attack. And that is what you need to do down the order. And there's going to be a lot of baseball rhetoric, a lot of baseball discussions, and I started this conversation referencing how quickly England was scoring. Matt Henry has a whack. Glenn Phillips can have a whack. Like Nathan Smith is a very good batter in all formats, but he can up the ante. So now you've got, like, the reason Glenn Phillips to me is Colin de Grandhomme is because Colin de Grandhomme could knuckle down a wee bit, but he was probably just going to smash boundaries. Glenn Phillips is a better batter than Colin de Grandhomme, but he does the same thing. He can craft out an innings, but he can also up the ante down the order. And when you've got bowlers who are very aggressive down the order, I think it changes the dynamic of your team. It's not like people want Tim Southee to knuckle down. No. I want Tim Southee to smash sixes. I want Matt Henry to whack boundaries. That's what I want to see. And I think they can do a better job of that than England. England, Stokes, Brooke, Zach Crawley, Joe Root, like Ben Duckett, all those dudes are going to score very quickly. Whereas the Black Caps are the opposite, right? Like I think their top order is going to be quite solid. They're going to play a Kiwi style of cricket. But then as you get down the order, they're going to have a whack, right? And I've got a lot more confidence in the Black Caps' lower order scoring quickly than England's lower order scoring quickly. There is the most awkward situation for the Black Caps batting unit is Tom Blundell averaging 14, which is less than Matt Henry in the World Test Championship. And Daryl Mitchell's averaging 29.3 in the Test Championship, which is well below his Test batting average of 44.9. So he's dropping, but series by series, because he's not scoring as many runs as he once did. Highest Test averages for New Zealand against England. Shout out to Charles Stewie Dempster, because he averaged 88.4 in 8 tests against England. Then we got Daryl Mitchell, 74.1. Then we got Tommy Blundell, 68.4. So like the weakest batters in the Black Caps team right now are the best New Zealand batters against England aside from Stewie Dempster.
Aside from Stewie Dempster, that's an important asterisk. I do know as well from memory that Kane Williamson actually has quite a bad record against England. I think he's only averaging in the low 30-ishes against them. I'm sure he's still on that list somewhere.
36.8.
36.8 with a couple of centuries. So like he scored
4
centuries against everyone. So yeah, well, there you go. He's had some big innings, but he's also had, I think he's been chipped out a little bit early. But I would imagine a lot of that is coming against Broad and Anderson, which frankly is no longer a thing he has to worry about. He's outlived them. in a Test cricket perspective.
I like Blundell's obviously not in great form, but he did score a 50 in Sri Lanka. He had a 60 in the first test. He did score a 63 in the Plunket Shield just gone as well, but his 41 in the second test. So he had 5 innings, 4 of them were single digits. Sure, that's not great, but you know, some of these batters did score just 150 in the series. It's not like everyone was dominating. Rachin Ravindra had a good start. He wasn't fantastic in the next 2 tests, and so on. Tom Blundell's 41 came in the second innings when Tom Latham hit an 86. Glenn Phillips was 48 not out. Tom Blundell was the only other batter to score 40 plus. So yes, he doesn't have a lot of runs. I'm not here to say that Tom Blundell is not out of form. He is out of form. He is batting to maintain his spot in the first 11 as the best wicketkeeper batter in Aotearoa. If your alternative is Devon Conway wicket-keeping, don't do that. Like, we can have it. There are specialist wicket-keepers around. Might as well just have Fennell in the team as the wicket-keeper. Tom Blundell did.
And Will Young wicket-keeper?
Yeah, well, at a skill set. Maybe Glenn Phillips stops bowling and goes back to being a wicket-keeper. Maybe that's the
keeps from what if Devon Conway keeps from one end and Phillips keeps from the other end, so you can have Phillips bowling at one end and then keeping at the other end, you know? He's like, take the true all-rounder status even further and have him doing 4 skill sets in one game.
If there's one bloke who can do it, it is the one and only G. Philly. My point here is that Tom Blundell did have one all-right score in India. And it was a score that added to a Black Caps win. Like, it helped his team win. Because only 3 batters scored 40 plus in that innings. And that took the Black Caps to a target of 359. So it helped his team. Tom Blundell also, as I said, scored 63 in the Plunket Shield just last week, or a few weeks ago. He finished last summer's Plunket Shield with a century. So it's very convoluted, it's very complicated, very complex with his England stuff, his averaging 14 in the Test Championship, how he scored his runs, what he's done in the Plunket Shield. Goes without saying, it's going to be an interesting series for Tom Blundell. We will be talking more about this series on Thursday. Do you have any leftover thoughts that we haven't touched on yet?
I guess not. Other than a little bit of Tim Southey's stat watch, but I haven't got that in front of me. But I do know he is nearing on 100 sixes. I was thinking about that when you're talking about the sluggers, and like, this series in a way is like, it's also a farewell, because it's Tim Southey's last Test series, unless we make the World Test Championship, which even then, that's not a series. This is his last, and it won't be in New Zealand. So this is his farewell to Kiwi conditions in Test match cricket, which has been his best format, but also he's been good in all the formats, and he's been absolutely elite at various times in the formats, which is a funny part about his career, is how he's sort of like alternated between his best one being one, then the other, then the other. So it is a bit of a, you know, it's a farewell. It's an honouring of Tim Southey in this series, and he has a couple of little cheeky milestones. If he can get 15 wickets to get to 400, that would be amazing. If he can just keep his bowling average under 30, that would also be amazing. I don't think it'd be very fair if it went over. I do remember once upon a time, in fact, it would have been Tim Southey's first series, come to think of it, when Stephen Fleming's last series was against England, and he had to get like 250 plus scores or something like that, or 100 runs in the match to keep his average above 40, which he did he just got there, and he ended up 40.02 or something like that. So there's precedent. That was the very start of Tim Southey's career, and now the very end, he might be trying to do the same thing, keep that bowling average under 30. And yes, a couple more sixes will make him, I think it's the 4th player, might be fifth player all time to get 100 sixes in Test match cricket. I know Ben Stokes is well out in front. Brendan McCullum's done it, and Adam Gilchrist has done it. I can't remember if there was a fourth one. There's at least one more player ahead of Saudi, but not with 100. So I can't. Yeah, whatever it is, big milestone there as well for someone who, especially if you look at that list of the most like the most sixes in Test match cricket in history. It's like legendary batter, legendary batter, legendary batter, Tim Southee, legendary batter, legendary batter. Like he's keeping some amazing company as part of that crew. So hopefully he can nudge that a little bit further as well.
However, Tim Southee's batting hasn't been good enough in Test cricket.
No, it's been a disappointment throughout his whole career, even though he's one of the best six hitters of all time.
We will talk a lot more Plunket Shield, I reckon, on Thursday in our bonus podcast available on Patreon and Substack. I would like to update Rhys Mariu's first-class batting average, which is now a whopping 62.46 after 9 tests. 3 centuries, including a double century, 4 50s. And obviously this comes on the back of his 240 against for Canterbury in the Plunket Shield. He also got a cheeky 8 not out in the second innings, so I imagine that's propelling that first-class batting average up over 60. Leading run scorers in the Plunket Shield: Nick Kelly, Jet Raval, Rhys Mariu, Dane Cleaver, Logan Van Beek. Max Chu is the only one with 3 50s in the Plunket Shield at the moment, though. Nick Kelly's got 2 centuries in that last round. Everyone else, like, they've got a century, they've got a 50, whatever. Max Chu, the wicketkeeper for Otago, is the only batter with 3 50s. So shout out to him. And we've got leading wicket takers, Scott Kugelheim, Liam Dudding. Just quickly, Liam Dudding's first-class bowling average is now 22.8. So shout out to Liam Dudding. Moved down from CD down to Wellington. Then we got Dunru Ferns, Brett Hampton, Jordan Sussex, Jared Mackay, Sean Solier, Travis Muller. So to our point about spin bowling, all these dudes are seamers. Will O'Rourke did take a fifer for Canterbury in the most recent round as well. And of course, I talked about Kane Williamson's 60 batting for Northern Districts. So I think Southee played for Northern, took a couple wickets. I think that's it. Will O'Rourke and Kane Williamson as well.